Where is InsurTech headed next? This is where indie agents own the answer. Welcome to the Vertifor Insurance Podcast. Let's go. Welcome back to another episode of the Vertifor Insurance Podcast. Today, I have with us two very special guests, and the three of us are going to sit down and settle a 20-plus year debate. The debate over the Buy Now button, which I would say is kind of coming to a head here as PL Rating has launched the Buy Now and Bind button inside of the system, and a feature that's available for insurance agencies' websites. So who better to have this settle this debate with than the father of the buy button himself, the one and only, the legend, the OG, Keith Savino, partner and principal of PCF. Keith was the PIA National Director, past president of NetView, the Accord Board as well, and a self-proclaimed evangelist for independent agents. Keith is a man to know in the insurance industry, somebody that I've respected from afar for quite a long time, and who I'm very excited to interview today. Keith, how are you, sir?
Sid, I'm awesome, especially today, because we're going to talk about something we've been chasing for 20 plus years.
Let's go. I love it. All right, so before we get into the fight, give me a little bit on Keith. For those who have been in a hole, maybe hermiting their life, I don't know, maybe they were a monk in some Buddhist temple, they don't know you. How did you get into insurance? How did you decide to champion this cause?
So I came into insurance through technology, actually. So
okay.
I was in the telephony industry. I was doing networking and sales in the telephony industry. And then I ended up in insurance. And my brother, who had been in the business, he was also self-started, originally in life insurance, pointed to a box of computers in the corner and said, you know what you could do? I bought this like 6 months ago. I haven't even sliced open the boxes. Why don't you go over there, cut them open and see what we can do with that? Seriously. And that was a Wang operating system, just to date myself. So, yeah. And then, the rest is history. .com time, I started writing technology risks. Most people's eyes glazed over on that conversation. I got involved with writing cyber from the probably very first cyber policy. So that's what I do now. I oversee our national cyber practice in PCF. And I've been involved in 5 different agencies over my career, sold to CIO, sales side, et cetera. And then all those groups that you mentioned before, Accord, PIA, NetView, ACT, Augie, whatever it takes to try to move the ball forward.
Okay, so before we get into the history of the Buy Now initiative, I'm going to pass it over to Gordon Kendall. He is our Director of Product Management for PL Rating, the genius behind the product development roadmap. Oh yeah, sir. Oh yeah, I'm teeing it up for you. I got you. And somebody who I've really loved getting to know over the past year and a half here at Vertifor. Gordon, how are you?
Wonderful. Thanks, Sid, for having us here.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe just give the audience a little bit of history on how you came to Vertifor. Why insurance? Most people, I'm not going to say it, but I'll say it, don't really choose insurance at the end of the day.
No, we don't. We never choose insurance. At least it wasn't in my story. So I spent close to 19 years at a carrier here in the East Coast, where it was a lot of upload, download, agency integration, agency management. It really developed a huge love for the independent agent channel and always wanting to see them succeed. And it's funny how we never plan on being in insurance, but there are so many people around us in our lives that are in insurance, and when we start mapping out our personal journey, insurance is never there, but we all land here, right? And then we can never get out. And then most of the time it happens because we get great or get tied to great organizations like ACT and Augie and all those other places where if you come in and you have the same desire to see the independent agent go forward, they don't allow you to leave. So, but I left the carrier there and I joined Border 2 years ago, and help continue to drive PL rating product forward, really into this next generation, so to speak. And I always told our old boss Dave Acker that, hey, you guys have done an amazing job laying the foundation here to allow us to build off of and to continue to drive this forward. And that's really why today I think is special, having Keith here along with us to help us understand the vision that was placed out there over the last decade plus, and how we can keep driving it forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to hear about how this thing is really coming to life, because it's been a vision for so long and now you've made it a reality. But before we get there, Keith, give me the history on this initiative. As the father of the buy button, you mentioned this conversation started in 2004. Is that right?
It really started in the evolution of, for those who remember the 90s, you could have a client walk into your office in personal lines, by the way. We're focused on that conversation here. And you would grab a manual and you had an idea of what each carrier wrote. I know this might sound crazy to people today, but back then that's the way we thought. So you knew if a carrier liked this demographic or that demographic. You as an agent would run the reports. You would complete the applications. You could send somebody home in just a few minutes with a policy. And you would estimate it either out of your manual, or there were vendors who took those manual rates and created manufactured comparative rating systems that would then give you an idea. And frankly, if somebody's premium came up to $637, you probably told them $660 and sent them home, and then they were pleasantly surprised if it came in less. That's kind of the way that it worked for a long time, and it was a different time of personal lines. Post-predictive modeling, multivariant rating, et cetera, secret sauce, that changed, right? So we moved from manufactured rates to the rating type platforms that we have today. And it seemed like a wonderful thing, except now the carriers came to you and said, I need you to quote things 100% of the time. Oh, great. And then there was the cost of the reports. And then there was who can access the reports, and can we get access to contributory databases? Agents can't. So we moved the control from the agent saying, this is what the client is, and here's how they're applying, to that all coming from third parties for verification, et cetera. And so now we effectively lost the ability to have that true bind process or buy button. And most of those rating platforms now, if you want to think in terms of a traffic light, they all had yellow buttons. So we've been sitting at a yellow light now for years. And even it was challenging for the rating programs. That's why they call rating programs, because they actually used to do rating. Now they're data aggregation tools more than they're rating tools, right? And they do request response and to get back those rates. Many of the agents really were slow to adopt even those platforms because they didn't trust the numbers that came back, right? They said, is it really truly bindable? No, it's an estimate based upon the best case. And then I have to bridge over to the carrier. Then I've got to, click. So there were some things that initially were fixed. The little checkbox that says, run the reports was not in most of the systems. Agents were finding themselves being billed back for reports out of their commission reports. It's a real business issue. In fact, I'll tell you what Dave Ack used to say all the time. This is a business issue. It's not a technology issue. So the industry is also often criticized for not solving the technology side. The technology side is solvable. A lot of it, what came down to, was the business side. So the buy button concept really was a business concept with a technology capability. And it was allowing an agent not to leave their systems, right, but to stay in their system and buying the coverage in real time for a prospect or remarket on a client. It wasn't, and this is the demystification, it wasn't about selling insurance online. You would see that often. People go, I don't know if I can get behind it.
Right.
It wasn't about that. And just remember, we're going back early 2000s, right? And I'm not saying that we shouldn't. I'm saying that's not what it was about. It was about being able to trust the numbers that come back, have a few of those buttons be green, right? Not yellow. So you could absolutely trust what you were telling the client, and it would not appear as a bait and switch, or that you'd have to go back and say, oh, now that I've run the reports, it looks like this, let's go re-rate it again.
Yep.
So, it has taken this period of time for the industry, with the help of many of the groups that Gordon and I just mentioned, to try to get that effort behind. And by the way, so that means there's been lots of people for 20 plus years involved in trying to move this ball forward.
Okay, so let me just break this down really quick. So and Gordon, maybe if you can give from a product standpoint the difference, as we were talking before we hit record, between the bind and the buy now, because they're two different, one is more external, one is more internal facing. And then I want to talk about why there was this sort of mystery or assumption around, oh, well, it's just a way to, sell more insurance online.
Yeah, I think as we started going on this journey, several years ago here, when I first joined Vertafore, it became really important and clear that we had to have a definition, and we had to clearly define that definition so that we all could speak the same language and knew what we were going after. So the term buy now and how we've coined it is allowing the consumer to purchase through an agent's website directly on a carrier's consumer-facing issuing platform. Now, we all know in the independent agent channel that the amount of consumers that are going direct to carriers for policy issuance is very small. That's why we have the trusted advisor in the picture here. Mm-hmm. Those agents play a key role here. But there are some consumers that are comfortable doing it, but they still want an agent in place, right? So when we went after that, we saw this was a way for us to explore what buy online kind of felt like, buy now. And that got us into the game there. As we kept going forward here, bind within PL rating is taking the workflow that is typically seen on the carrier site when the bridge over to actually issue the policy is to bring that back into PL rating. So essentially, to Keith's point here, that policy issuance would be in the PL rating software application where the agents can leverage a single workflow to issue a policy across multiple carriers. Mm-hmm. And that's really what we're going after with bind, is how do we create that singular workflow that can be leveraged in an agency for multiple carriers. And that's really what comparative raters started out at, single entry, multiple carrier response. You enter the data once, you hit, the 10 to 15 markets that you're going after to get a rate, and you get those rates back. So same concept here with bind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess if I think back, Keith, to the history of this initiative, right, and how things were done before comparative raters and before this digital presence, when the customer or prospect walked through the front doors, if I was to draw an analogy, it's kind of like they're walking through the carrier's front door as opposed to the agent's front door online without the buy now or bind button, right? I mean, in a way that if you see technology and a website as like the digital storefront or digital home front or digital agency, right, for that business, then you have to have some sort of buy now or bind button. Otherwise, you're right, the control or power is kind of just in the carrier's hands, which is that's a sticky issue at the end of the day when the agent is the one with the relationship.
Right. So an agency that's in a community that's known, they have a brand, they're invested in acquiring a customer. They want to be able to provide a good customer experience. Now, whether that is that they are speaking with someone in person, or if they're coming through the agency's digital customer acquisition strategy, right? They should have a good, consistent experience. That includes getting accurate, bindable quotes, right? If you can't provide that in person and you can't provide that online, then you have now disadvantaged yourself to those companies that offer that experience, but typically that's through a captive or direct writer. Why? Because they're only quoting one company. I used to joke that I could do the same thing if I called each day of the week for a company. Oh, Tuesday begins with a T, so we'll quote the company that starts with a T. And if I began and ended that, I could provide that probably truly bindable quote. I would also be ignoring my responsibility as being an independent agent and working to provide the best solutions for the client, right? So, yeah, I could turn myself into a different captive on every day of the week, and probably in personal lines today, most folks probably have a company, well, except for some states, for almost every day of the month. That's just in on the auto side, but this also impacts other lines of business like home or umbrella, right? Because the third party reports that agents can't contribute to, we can't get access to them because we're not part of the contributory database, are used in the underwriting process by many of the carriers. When the premiums change, it means that the client could easily lose patience and go somewhere else. This is not a good customer experience. You know, independent agents have more carriers offering more variety of coverages, endorsements, and premium options than direct writers and captive agents. True? We should look the best in that process. And that's why I've always been such an advocate of driving towards that buy button or bind button at the end of the customer interview, the end of that conversation.
Yeah.
We had it in the 90s.
Yep.
We don't have it today.
Yep.
So this is an example where technology and the business solution has not actually advantaged the agency.
So do you think, I'll have to ask the tough question here, do you think there's an unintended consequence?
Yes.
Right, with the pros, and I hear you out on that, right? Like, absolutely, we've got the power back, but do you think there's an unintended consequence around commoditization, right? Do you think that, or any other unintended consequences that maybe as we're starting to roll this out or seeing that we didn't expect?
There's no difference between putting the information in and carriers having company unique questions and understanding the difference in coverage between the carriers, whether I get the right rates or the wrong rates. There's no difference in that process. The difference in the process is being able to close the sale at the end of the conversation.
And the other thing, I'll just hop in here too. Comparative rating has always been in place. The use of comparative raters, that is a different thought process, right? Because it's very easy for, and I know several agents that would input their, quotes that they have on an Excel spreadsheet. They'll ship it out overnight. They'll get comparative rates overnight. Comes back in to them in the morning. They've just comparatively rated, those risks. It was all manually done, but it's still the act of comparative rating it's always been in play. Yeah. So I know there's a lot of talk about commoditization of these personal lines auto products. I don't think comparative raters have done it. What they do allow here is they allow agents and agencies to be effective and efficient at quoting a personal lines risk that historically hasn't paid, from a commission perspective, a high dollar, right? So to make sure that agents are being effective and efficient here and they're able to compete, it comes down to volume, right? That's the way that the model works here, right? And I think without the comparative raters, it's one of those things where we'd almost push the agents back. I'd say even back further than the 90s, because now you're getting pen and paper and you have to know the rock, you have to know all the rates and everything, right? And it's really a huge step backwards, where this is saying, hey, let's capture data, let's push it out to all of your carrier partners and get that rate call one back, right? I think as one of the big things we're pushing forward with buying today is not to get rid of rate call one, because it plays an important part in the process here. But then how do we take that and move it to a rate call two? And this gets to where Keith's going is now, and what we're coining it as a verified rate. And this is a rate where the agent and the carrier are agreeing and saying, based off the data attributes that, one, we've secured, two, we've gone out, got contributory type data. This is the rate on the risk, and we're okay collectively to move forward with issuing, right? We're really not trying to change that workflow. What I always say right now around bind is I want to streamline it. I want to make it easier for Keith to be on the phone and say, yep, you know what, this is going to be your rate. You want it? All right, let's sell it. And then we could sell it, we move on to the next one, right? Because we need the agencies to grow organically. Okay. They can't rely on their renewal book to keep them moving forward. It's got to be organic new business growth. And when you say that in personal lines, we got to be effective and efficient with it.
So taking, oh, go ahead, Keith.
I was going to, Gordon, thank you for pointing out the standards, right? So these standards have been in place for a long time, right? Rate request 1, 2, 3, rate call 1, 2, 3. And so again, the technology is not in the way of this. The standards were built by the industry. What we have done is taken away the ability for the independent agent to, again, provide that good experience for the client that begins and ends on that initial call. It's so difficult. No one wants to be surprised. So even if you go through that process, you collect the information, the moment you bridge to one, what's the client hearing? Dead air. It's very difficult to keep that experience. And now the rate comes back different. And you go, oh, all right, well, let me try this other one now. Well, we're going to end up at those numbers anyway.
Yep.
You should never be concerned about being spreadsheeted. You should always be happy you're on the sheet. That's the point to a carrier. You want to be in the mix. For 300 years, insurance has been spreadsheeted. We're independent agents. We're supposed to be looking out for the betterment of our client. And I mean, in our world and in most of the professional agents that I speak with, it's not about $50. It's about what fits for the client. And there are differences between these programs. They're not all created equal, and not everyone is perfect for everyone. It's the reason why many of the carriers, even when they're not competitive, they want that data back. They want you to quote it, even when they lose, because they learn as much in losing as they learn otherwise. I would certainly also engage them in their coverages as well, particularly when you get into the property side where there's a constant leapfrogging in the marketplace. So I would say to the carriers who are concerned, look at your agency force, right? This is not about rating. This is about, is your agency force, are they partners? Are they working with you? Are you moving in the same direction? All the things that used to be important in the 90s when you had a good partnership. Let's not commoditize the agency force either, because there is differences between your partnership relationships with folks. So that would be, to me, the focus. It should not be about, can I actually get an accurate number? It's amazing to me in 2023, we can even have a debate about the need for an accurate quote at the end of the conversation.
By the way, ChatGPT was released, and we're worried that AI is going to destroy human life. But
we still can't get an accurate quote the first time unless you are, because every button's yellow. And my goal is to, I'm going to use an old Zig Ziglar thing that used to say, do you call the traffic light in the middle of the intersection a stoplight? A lot of people do. Okay. Take the traffic light out of the intersection and tell me what happens to traffic. Okay. They're go lights. So that's what we have to do. We have to change our philosophy here to turning the process into a go light.
So are you, it feels like from the buy now side of things, where the agent is in control of the conversation and, looking to start and end on the same call and provide an accurate rate, and then hopefully and get a decision from the prospect. But I think about that the externally facing option, and I'm curious, Keith, whether you're like, would you warn agents to be a little afraid of that option, or do you think they should dive head first with it? And here's kind of my thought process, and tell me where I'm wrong. I think back to that book, right, that my dad probably had that I didn't know about because he burned by the time I came into the agency, and would pull off the shelf, and he's on the phone and he's going through all the different rates and, saying 660 instead of 637. So he makes him feel better. It would be almost like he took that book and he duct taped it to the outside of his building and said, well, come to my building and, look at the rates or quotes. And then if you want to buy something, great, just put a sticky note on the door or something, right? there's no interaction with with him. Like, he doesn't get to build the relationship. Do you feel like that's a fair comparison? Do you feel like I'm maybe taking it to an unnecessary extreme? And, kind of like at the end of the day, what do you think, right? I mean, is this something that agencies should use or should maybe use carefully?
I can answer your question by saying it's up to each agency. That conversation around, should I expose what I'm offering to the general public or to the outside public? Can I leverage my brand in my community to extend it out to compete online? That's an individual decision by each agency. Supporting the initiative to have accurate quotes, whether you do it in person or online, to me is just a no-brainer, right? We should always, well, okay, so if you don't support accurate quotes, then you support inaccurate quotes, right? I mean, so what are you fighting for? It should always be for accuracy, because accuracy allows us to compete at the point when somebody wants something. 15 years ago, a client, you could say, hey, look, I'll call you back in 5 days, whatever. Now, if you're not calling somebody back in 5 minutes, they might be gone. So you need to meet the customer, your customer, where you think they're going to buy. Now, if you specialize predominantly in hyper high net worth personal lines and you're doing it in a particular way, you may or may not feel as if this is your market. Maybe most of your clients are coming through a family office. That's one piece. If you're writing recreational vehicles 99% of the time because of your location, that might be different. That's why I said it's going to be different for each agency. However, I mean, from my perspective, I've had CRQ on our website since the day it came out, right? Which is consumer rate quote for those who don't know.
Yep.
And so we've always offered the ability for people to submit online.
Yep.
And here's how we enabled it. We looked at it as the post-sale process becomes incredibly important when someone does look to procure their insurance through you on your brand locally. So if they did make a purchase, you don't consider the post-sale as the end. So when you do the pre-sale and they buy everything that you want, your post-sale looks different. When you are acquiring online based upon your prerequisites, right? You don't want to write below a particular limit, et cetera, right? Based upon your prerequisites. Now, the post-sale is important. So when that person purchases insurance, almost immediately then somebody is engaging with them. Hey, I just want to say thank you very much for this. Let's go over the decisions that you made. We want to make sure you know that we're here for you.
Yep.
And there may be clients who say, well, that's not what I wanted. Well, maybe they're not your customer then. But the point is, when you're working with a client, that sales process and the technology that you use pre, post, and during the policy period also becomes very important. So I would always say that any of the rating systems are that. They're aggregators. Let's get to the green button, whether it's online or in your office in person or any other way, right? But you also need to be making a commitment to other technology in your office, such as having the right management systems, the CRM systems, client nurturing tools, because the sales process is more than that 20 minutes that you speak with a client initially engaging you, right?
Yep.
So
oh, go ahead, Gordon. Yes, please.
Yeah, no, Keith, I want to hop on one thing that you said here, and thank you about it too, is the comment of choice, right? As we look in the independent agent channel, that choice factor, whether it's the carriers you represent, the agents that get selected for carriers to represent, the consumer choice is really at the heart of the independent agent channel. And it really has to be at the heart of rating too, because we want that choice, decision to come through in the technology we build, so the choice around buy now, that's really too, we're taking it from a carrier perspective, an agent perspective, and allowing choice to be made. And even with bind too, I think it's very important. It's not an all for nothing thing. Choice has to be made here. And we really can't, with a big broad paintbrush say, you will do bind online. I just don't ever see an environment that will ever occur in. It always comes down to choice. And that's the uniqueness of the independent agent channel, choice.
Yep. Yeah, I think back to when Google Compare came into the industry and said, okay, we've got it figured out. By the way, we're cannibalizing our ad revenue. But aside from that, we're going to make so much money off of Google Compare. And they hired this guy from or I think maybe he had started a Google Compare UK, and then he tried to open it up in the US. And what they found was that just about 70% of people who visited Google Compare went through the whole process up until the moment that they had to bind, and then they called somebody. And then about 30% actually said, okay, I'm going to bind. And so I think there is value. And I mean, I'm, in my 30s, I would probably go to an agent's website at this point. And if I was shopping, right, and look and see, okay, well, I want to information gather. I want to empower myself so that by the time I get on the phone, I don't sound like I don't know what I'm talking about. So I do think there's value in it at the end of the day.
We find that with CRQ now. So if someone completes, they go online and they complete, and sometimes it's our own producers, right? Because it's convenient for them. They're in the field. They work on it because they're sitting in somebody's conference room. So that's one part of it. But we're almost immediately engaging them, right? Because the further you wait after being engaged, whether it's to fill out a web form or they actually go through the process, which is quite simple for the person online at this point. Now you get a chance to engage them. If you don't speak with that person, there's a really good chance you're going to lose them. And when I say speak with them, I'm saying communicate them in a method that they want to communicate. There's one piece that was left out of this conversation now. We talked about if somebody walks in your office, and we're speaking about acquiring a new customer online. One of the other considerations here was that if you can get accurate quotes, that means that within your own client portals, you should also be able to embed these links. So that if somebody visits you and they've got a home and they have an auto, but you don't write their watercraft, I want to be able to quote that inside my client portal and provide that cross-selling opportunity to them while they're checking on their other policies. Right. So I think there are agents who would say, yeah, that I'll do. Right. Before maybe they would say they would extend it outside to the general population. Right. So there's a walk before you run scenario. So at least three. I call it level one is inside your agency. Level two is account rounding inside your client portals, gives them another one. And level three is client acquisition on the outside.
Oh, yeah.
That's levels of thinking for agents.
You just blew my mind. I'm thinking about marketing campaigns. I'm thinking about an email that says, hey, if you add, if you bundle your home with this, save $40, boom, button that goes right to it. There's no call somebody, there's no waiting, you can do it right there. I mean, that's
increase PIF count, right? So it's all about number of policies per client. So why wouldn't we want a way where we can help to cross-sell throughout the year the number of policies per client? That helps our account executives and our producers. And to Gordon's point, new revenue, new policy, which is a big focus for our firm, is the definition of organic growth. Not just acquisition of firms, but also new policy, new revenue equals organic growth. It has a very high value factor to us.
Yeah. Keith, what are you? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. No, please, Gordon, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to make the comment that, I think as we look at our own personal shopping journeys, there's a level of like, you look at Amazon, that experience, and your comfort level with buying something from Amazon versus like your comfort level of buying like a high value item. And we each have different limits, right? And I say this, being in the insurance industry for over 20 years, I still don't trust myself, right? When I start talking about insuring large assets, and that's really where I think we are seeing this, where a lot of consumers are saying, I want to start the journey, but I still want someone to come behind me and check, because I'm not an insurance licensed agent, right? And I see that concept happening over and over again, specifically when we start talking about like consumer facing buying. Why the journey starts. Yes, we want to go, we want to get that rate, we want to understand where we're going to land. But you know what, Keith, I still need you to push the button, right? It's not me pushing the button, because I could miss something, And here, I should have started off this. We all have an underwriting background. So do I. And I still will not buy my insurance without my agent doing it for me.
Just about every study that you see just continues to reconfirm that. I love saying the D words have changed over the years. In the 90s, we were being disintermediated. In 1995, Bill Gates wrote a book called The Road Ahead. I think it was 11 months later, he had to rewrite half the chapters. That's how quickly technology had been introduced.
Wow.
And the disintermediation period that we were going through during the dot-com boom was that all of these online companies were going to put independent agents out of business. Fast forward, we went from disintermediation to disruption. It's a different D word. Go back to 2015, all the disruption that was going on. Now, fast forward, all of those, we overuse the word insurtech, frankly, because it's not always a technology company. Sometimes it's just someone with digital distribution. But many of those carriers today have seen a tremendous reduction in their valuation. Shareholders aren't thrilled. And now they're reaching out to independent agents for the distribution of their product. 15 years ago, I can name 2 or 3 major national captive companies who today, fast forward, are all through independent agents. So there is, if anything, the independent agency system is stronger today than it has ever been. And it has grown in personal lines, not shrunk in personal lines, right? If you consider that all of those captives are now with independent agents, right? So a lot of those numbers have been wrong. And the reason why I say that is because it's not just personal lines. This conversation that we're having is also going to be around commercial lines and executive and specialty lines. And every agency needs to have a philosophy that works for their current clients and their target demographics, right? In each one of those areas. Again, I'm just trying to get an accurate quote. And if I can't do that, they're going to go somewhere else.
Gordon,
that's the challenge.
We're working.
I was going to say, Gordon, for those listening who just want to get an accurate quote, how do they make this happen?
I think it all, as we talked about, like rate call 1, and moving on to rate call 2, and then ultimately 3 with the issuance here it really comes down to, it's really not technology here because we can build it right. It's really saying how do we get the right data set at the right time to be able to confidently put those figures out in front of a consumer, and this goes to, kind of like I use it like my lighthouse in the fog is, hey, I want to get them there effectively and efficiently, right? And when I say they, it's the agents, getting them to that rate effectively and efficiently, one where the confidence level is there to put it out in front of a consumer, knowing that this is what it's going to be based on the data set that was provided.
When is this going to be available to agencies interested?
Of course,
Gordon, when?
That's a hard question, Sid. That's like the top of the list hard. I will say this, we are heads down. We've been heads down for several months, building out a workflow. We're socializing the workflow with our carrier partners, our agency partners, getting great feedback on it. We're looking to start building it here shortly, and knock on wood and all the stars align. I'm hoping, by end of year, we should have something that's operationalized and out there and going. Granted, there's a lot of things that occur between now and then, especially when we're talking about several different workflows and those pieces that go into a workflow, a singular workflow, and just the differences that each agency brings in, each carrier brings in, and trying to solve for all that. I think at the end of the day here, if we were to say, this is my underwriting days, the vanilla risks, the ones that are clean, the carriers want to write it. If we can get those up and going, and really get those in the buying process, I'd take that as a win, because it's streamlining it. Those are ones where, to Keith's point, if I can get in, they're on the phone and issue and move along, that's a PIF, that's premium. We're moving forward. And we're
taking care of the insured. Isn't that the whole point of this conversation? Sometimes we look at the technology and the business challenge so much that we forget about something. We're in this business because of kindness and caring and wanting to take care of the insureds. Right. That's really you can't be in this business if you don't have kindness in your heart, if you don't have caring. When someone has a claim, you need to be there for them, right? Yeah. So that process, I believe, really comes across from the vast majority of independent agents who are focused, and that's why they grow, because of that. We just need to actually have them have accurate quotes so they can close the conversation. The
Yeah.
folks are sold. I have complete confidence in the independent agency system. I
Oh, yeah.
know they want to buy from that agent, but when it takes sometimes days or hours for the person to finish that process, they just go somewhere else. And I actually believe in many cases they end up with less sophisticated products that may not satisfy their needs simply because it was easier to purchase.
Yeah. So Keith, what are you going to do on January 1st of 2024 after the buy and bind buttons are released and you don't have to like, are you going to go on a cruise? You're going to take retirement? Like what you're going to, this is a 20
Now, there's
year,
always something else said. There's always something,
there it is.
I'm focused on cyber and technology right now. I mean, it's great, but I can tell you this: if for some reason things don't happen, I know where Gordon lives.
Yeah. Keith, the other thing too, I'll call out
Dave
too.
Acker and I are going to take a ride
Yeah.
up. I might even be able to recruit my old friend Doug Johnson, who was at Applied years ago. And we were working it. So all of these folks were involved when
Yeah.
Augie got behind it, et cetera. So, you know, I'm just thrilled that Gordon's picked up the baton and runs with it with as much passion as anyone I've met on this topic.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And Keith, this is a journey. Like I said at the start of the conversation here, the foundation was laid. All right. The baton, we're picking it up, we're moving it forward. It's a journey though. So January 1st, hey, we get one through, a vanilla one, that's the first step. But we're not going to stop there. We're going to keep on going here because we've got to get this workflow effective and efficient. To Keith's point, I really want the agents spending their time on value added activities for the agency. And that, like you said, is taking care of the insureds, taking care of them. That's value add. Issuing a policy, we got it. That's a business process. It really comes down to taking care of the insured.
Keith, I have one last question to take us home here, and that is for all of the 2004 Keiths living in 2023, right? If that makes sense. So it's the young bucks out there, the indie agents who have their cause that they're trying to champion. They see something going awry in the independent agent model, and they want to affect that change, right? I am assuming that there were points in your journey over the last 20 years where you probably just wanted to throw your hands up and say, no one's listening. It's not moving fast enough. It's not working. And yet here we are, on the eve of the 20th year, and you've got the guy running all things for PL Rating and, the CEO of Vertifor in agreement that this is where we're headed, standing on stage saying, like, we're committed to this year. What do you say to the young bucks out there that are in your shoes, but 20 years ago?
Well, I can tell you the passion and persistence pays off. So, never give up. Get involved in your state trade associations. This actually began at I think in Atlantic City at a PI in New Jersey meeting with regional carriers. And I think there was one or two nationals in the room. And Dave Acker and Doug Johnson and a few other people came in for this. So it often these start at a local level. So that's where you need to start it. I absolutely would encourage people to get involved with Augie as well, because if you go to augiegroup.org, you'll see that most of the major vendor systems, state associations, technology committees, all collaborate together in one place at one time. There is no cost to participate in that. Lots of white papers there. So I already mentioned the trade associations and those. And then lastly, obviously your user groups, regardless of what system you're using, there's an opportunity. No one is throwing volunteers away, right? And that's how everyone, lots of relationships I have in this business for a long time, they've typically come from those three areas. And for those who wonder, how you might have time to do that, I have to ask the question, how do you not find time to do that? If you're in this business, you're in the business. And if you can affect change, you're going to do it. And I could tell you that personally, I've received back 20x anything I've ever contributed to the business. So if you are younger in the business today and you're looking for a doorway and you just don't know where to go, hit me up. I'm more than happy to railroad you into some committee somewhere from somebody to do something to help everybody else. So I will end with this. There's a lot of volunteers who were involved in this project over the years and still will be. And, you might say you don't call them all out by name. Well, most of them that I know wouldn't want to be called out by name. They all embrace a philosophy, which is if you do something nice for somebody and more than two people know about it, you and the person you did it for, you might have done it for the wrong reasons. So these are folks who have dug the wells, that people are drinking out of today. And they also know when they did it, there was someone before them. And then there was someone before them. So, we're talking a few hundred years of driving this. But technology, those driving technology in this business were 70s, 80s people. So, there's a lot of history and there's a roadmap for you to follow. It's not that difficult. Get engaged and make it happen. And I hope somebody's going to pick it up behind me at some point in time. Well, thank you, Gordon. And
We'll keep it
Sid.
going.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Keith, thank you so much. Not just for carving out time today, but for all the work over the last two decades. That is a lot of work to put in, a lot of muscle, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. So as somebody who's, in their 30s, I feel like I'm just getting started in the industry. Thanks for making sure that it's a strong model, going forward. We appreciate you. And for those of you guys who are interested, well, Gordon and his team are working very hard to make things happen this year, so just make sure you stay tuned. And if you loved this episode, which I know you did because we settled a 20-year debate, go to youtube.com, hit that subscribe button, follow us on your favorite podcast platform, and stay tuned for more weekly episodes. Guys, with that, hope you all have an awesome one, and thanks again.
Thanks, Sid. Thanks, Gordon.
Thanks, Keith.